All right, and not only are we a minute late, which is actually pretty good for this channel, all things considered, but we are also severely later in the day than normal. Normally, you guys would expect this episode like either 2 hours ago or 6 hours ago as of recently. But things have changed a little bit because our guest here, James, was way too busy for us to get any of that in, but we desperately wanted to get James on. We also have a microwave. That is my third co-host. That is me thawing out chicken for later, whenever I'm done with this, to hopefully cook, if maybe I can. But apparently, that's beeping. You just had some lamb? You brought the lamb sauce?
Lamb sog. It was actually Indian food. Yeah.
Excellent.
But it was a lamb sauce. So you can have it on rice.
You have the lamb sauce.
It was good.
That said, we do have Ocean on as well, because apparently we're able to finally get him back again for the time being. It is, for the next 18 minutes, it is still Thursday. And we have our hammers.
It is. So we have to say it before it...
because we'll lose it otherwise.
James, we have to cancel the show in 15 minutes, just so you know. So let's make it quick. We have to say Happy Thursday as our outro. Or actually, it will be Frigga's Day. That's
and then we'll be completely out of the way.
Right.
So it is later than usual. Sorry for that, guys. But with that said, we do have James as our guest from Modern Day Debate. I'm pointing the wrong way as I'm no longer mirrored. Let me fix that. There we go. That's slightly better.
Yeah, that guy.
The guy over there.
That guy.
Yeah, you gotta point up. I gotta point like up-ish over that way. If I point here, I'm pointing at the chat.
Why are we... No, all right. How many people are watching this?
Enough people to know that I'm making mistakes.
Yes.
Also, Ocean, how are you doing today?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Yes is an emotion.
Doing a lot of like running around like a chicken with my head cut off lately because
that's
trying to arrange the purchase of a new car, which I knew nothing about cars. I've been driving the same 4Runner for almost 10 years now. I want to say that, yeah, about 10 years, and I've racked up 269,000 miles on it because I drive a lot. I don't know very much about cars though, so you're
just like me. It's a point A to point B vehicle, and it can do that. Like, you're happy.
Cool. I'm gonna get a new vehicle, and I do all this car research. I'm looking at things like the Camaro. I'm looking at things like the Mustang and the Challenger, and like all these.
Don't lie,
like,
you weren't looking at a Mustang.
Cars. I was not actually. When I started out, I was like looking at these cars, and I was like, I'm cool with getting a Challenger or a Camaro, but I hate Mustangs. So I'm the perfect Camaro customer. And I found out like all these things about cars. I was researching all the stuff about engines and modifications to vehicles and all this other shit because I researched something. I get deep into it, and I was going into different companies. I was looking at Audi. I was looking at BMW and Chevrolet and looking at their dependability ratings and all this other shit. And I've made the decision. I'm gonna get another 4Runner.
I mean, if it was reliable, then you might as well just go with what's
exactly.
reliable.
Because when it comes right down to it, like I was looking at Jeep too, but it's because I'm interested in for work, I need to do some off-roading every once in a while. That's the reason why my 4Runner's been so damn useful. But the Jeep and is got rumors of dependability issues because of the Fiat purchase of Chrysler. So
the podcast is now vehicled out, by the way.
We are now talking about cars, guys. So this is what happened. I went from knowing nothing about cars to being like semi-competent on cars, on car conversations. So, but I'm like, I found out that what's the best off-roader? It's apparently the car that I already fucking have. So I'm just going to get a new one of the same thing.
Just going to grab it again. It's okay. Just get
rather than... Because like the car that I have needs all kinds of repairs. It's got body problems and all sorts of shit. But I'm gonna wind up getting another 4Runner. So we're gonna see how that goes. I'll probably get it in a couple of weeks.
Awesome.
Anywho, that's a lot of what I've been working on is getting that arranged. So yeah.
my day has been getting a script finished for a collaboration with Telltale. For those who are fans of Telltale, that ideally in a perfect world should go up tomorrow because I don't plan on sleeping tonight. On top of that, I had an appearance on Drunken Peasants earlier today. which was cut short because I also had to do the thing with Telltale. Basically, I scheduled a bunch of things one after another and made a lot of horrible mistakes. I've made mistakes in my life. And so here I am completely overloaded because that's what I do. Also, the beard is gone. It is missing.
Wow.
No.
Are you sad, Ocean?
No.
It'll come back eventually.
Cyrus. It's gone.
We still got hammers. We still got these.
No. Put it down. You don't deserve it.
I had the hammer before I had a beard, okay?
That's fair. Okay, fine.
But with that said, we have spent about 5 minutes talking, brushing up on everything that's been going on, and we still need to introduce James from Modern Day Debate properly. How is it going, James? How are you doing?
Thrilled to be
that
here.
way. That-ish way. Yes, there we go.
So James is somebody that I'm really happy to have on this channel because he is the host of the Modern Day Debate channel, and which has been, if you guys haven't been watching it, you guys need to watch it. It's got all kinds of really awesome debates on it. He's bringing on people that are tackling like big philosophical concepts and that are both inside of Christianity and then outside of Christianity and just philosophical concepts in general. It's really, really quality stuff, and he's bringing on really cool people to have those debates that are like both really qualified people and people that are big personalities on the YouTube and Twitter scenes. So big shout out to him. And again, go check out his channel. Not now, after we'll put a link to it.
Link is already in the description.
Yes, link is in the description to his channel.
Already got you.
And he's doing, like, you're doing debates every day almost, right? It seems like every day.
Probably sometimes it averages that because of Friday and Saturday. Sometimes we'll do like 2. So I enjoy it.
You're doing the same
not every
thing.
day, sometimes twice a day.
Yeah, you're doing the same thing I'm doing. I started daily uploads, and all of a sudden my ability to have a social life kind of tanked. I know how you feel.
It's a weird thing where, there's like research on like, are online communities just as fulfilling as in-person communities? And I just get so much, honestly, I feel so excited, and I love it. Like, I just can't get enough of it. And I'm honored to say we've gotten to have both of you. Cyrus and Ocean have been on, and it's been interesting. We've had a number of conversations with Cyrus, which has been fun. And then Ocean, we've had you on, and so my hope is that it's a nonpartisan platform. So I'm Christian. I think some people know that. And I just hope that I can like treat people kindly who disagree with me, and even maybe build relationships. Like, I don't know, that's a lot more meaningful to me. But anyway, so yeah, glad to be here.
That's one of the things that makes me really excited about it, is that you're moderating and you're Christian, and yet it's like there's a lot of the Christian debate channels. There've been a couple that have tried to start up, but
they interject a lot.
They interject. There's a lot of bias that winds up coming from the moderator, and it's like and a lot of atheist hosts that have been doing this kind of thing, they have similar problems, but it seems to be to a lesser extent. You getting it down pat. I'm really excited about it. That I don't think that anybody should be afraid to come on your channel for fear of the moderator screwing them over. You're definitely running a fair scene over there, which is really, really awesome. I'm super excited about it.
Thanks. That's encouraging.
Awesome. Well, there's a reason that I've been fine hopping on there multiple times. There also should be, assuming that all the terms are agreed to, there should be another debate with me on that channel here in whenever the date is figured out for that. I'll let you guys know on does dating, because they want carbon dating and I want radiometric dating. One of
I
us
thought
is
you were
correct.
talking about like dating, like
does dating mean young Earth? I don't know.
Right.
Does Ken Ham date? No,
I'm going to be dating a girl named Carbon soon.
She sounds like she's not going to last that long. I'm dating one called Uranium, and I think that her shelf life is better.
Bad jokes.
They are horrible jokes.
It's terrible.
That's funny.
Okay. To be fair, you started it.
I did. I regret it. So,
no, you don't.
Yes, I do.
So, topic. We actually probably need to get into that. It's
we
only
have
been 10
we have
minutes.
brought a topic for you guys today that James wants to kind of present to us. So James running a debate show that's focused on philosophy. He has wound up with some opinions. So he wants to present to us today, the infamous Pascal's wager, but he's got a couple of updates to it. So it's to you, James. Let's hear what your version of it is.
I'm thrilled to share this argument. So I guess I'm unintentionally maybe misleading when I call it Pascal's wager, because I've had both Christians and atheists, wager fans and wager critics who have said, it's not really Pascal's wager. And I'm like, yeah, it's true. I just use that term because it's close to it, and it kind of gets people to understand basically where I'm going. I think it's true Pascal had, there were too many problems for it to be a good argument.
Can we outline the original argument first?
Sure. Yeah, it's a good idea. So
cool.
Pascal was kind of like, hey, what about the skeptic who says there's no evidence? How do we maybe persuade them? And he said, well, maybe we can use some sort of practical utility argument. And that just means that put in a more simple, easier ways. Maybe there's a reason you should believe that's not evidential, but that would still be driven by rationality. So, for example, yeah, exactly. So, like, he's known as the father of decision theory, and this pretty much was the start of decision theory in its like most crude, like rudimentary form. Basically saying, hey, basically he had said, okay, skeptical friend, if you want to say there's no evidence, I'll concede that for the sake of argument, but you should still believe, because if you believe and you're right, hey, wow, it's great, you get to go to heaven. But if you believe and you're wrong, you go to hell, or you at least miss out on heaven. We know that for sure. And so that alone, even if there were no hell, just to miss out on heaven compared to getting to go to heaven, you should wager. And so the biggest critique.
Does his original argument include hell? Because most forms that I've seen it have been like, well, if you're wrong, then you get the punishment.
Right. Yeah. And so that is like he states in the Pensees that, like, one of the original work with the wagers, there's like a number of wagers in there. But yes, like hell is, as a Christian, like I wouldn't, as a contemporary wager arguer, I don't think we actually need hell. I think it makes the argument stronger, but you could even go without hell. Right. I know that some of the objections involve like hells of other religions. And so like, I'm like, okay, well, let's talk about those. Like, so I'm not trying to like get it off the conversational table. I'm willing to engage it. And like I said, I think it ultimately actually helps.
The objection I would have to that is the only one you could really use would be like the Muslim one. There's not very many belief-based hells.
And to be fair, Gehenna's pretty cool. It does have nuclear fruit.
Wait, what?
I actually have an entire video on the Muslim.
I'm not letting you run away with that one.
No, so the version of Muslim hell is called Gehenna, and in Gehenna you actually do experience hunger, and there are angels that have to come feed you. It's guarded by 19 angels. So the angels that have to come feed you, they have to feed you a fruit called zakum. Zakum is a fruit that comes from a tree that gains all of its sustenance from the blood, sweat, and tears of the people who are burning in Gehenna. As a result, because it's basically hellfire fruit.
So you're being fed by...
You're being fed by angels.
Oh.
And you're being fed the fruit from your own waste. And the fruit Zakum, it's said that it can only exist in... Gehenna, because if it were to exist in real life, a drop of the juice from Zakum could level an entire city. It could potentially destroy the world. An entire fruit could destroy the world. So I did a video on Gehenna.
At least that's a badass fruit.
Yeah, I did a video on Gehenna, and I basically said, so you're telling me that I'll be given a body in Gehenna that can survive eating nuclear fruit?
That's kind of cool.
That sounds actually really neat.
So, and I'm being fed by angels in the process. I'll take the torment. That sounds good. But a lot of other religions have to get back to the objection. A lot of other religions have um like afterlives that are kind of catch-alls, where you have the different holds for different gods, and then you have like a an underworld that is um that most people go to, regardless of whether or not they believe. So um this idea that other hells would be an objection to Christianity goes under the assumption that all other religions have the same function that Christianity has of a belief based afterlife. It's the case. So, like odds are, like it's say that heaven's not real, but another afterlife is. It's not terrible. Like for the Christian, if the
Yeah.
Christian would wind up going to, say the afterlife of my tradition would be Helheim. Oh no, fields and trees and a fairly content existence of being cared for by the matronly deities.
Not all terribly different than just being in a nature-based
Right,
hospice home, except you're not going to die.
right. And so, like, what's the okay. You know, like I wouldn't be able to use that as an objection to Pascal's wager. It would just be like, well, the alternative is this, which doesn't seem to be all that bad. Um, but that's regardless of whether or not you take the wager.
Yeah, I think my issue with I have two issues with the regular version of Pascal's wager, depending on which version we're talking about. Because obviously, Pascal's original version,
without hell, I guess. So,
well, Pascal's original version of the wager differs from the modern version that's touted now. The modern version has more of a false dichotomy problem, where it assumes there's one of two scenarios. Either the Christian's right or the Christian's wrong, or the atheist right or the atheist is wrong. And these two are still sides of a coin. And all of the scenarios are posited based on this, because it's just Christian versus non-believer. My issue with the modern version is it's basically a false dichotomy, because once you start bringing in the other religions, then you start to have some issues. You also have the issue of what if the God that's available is not actually any of the gods that we know? What if it's not a known God? Once you start bringing in all of those, it becomes even more problematic. But Pascal's original version of the wager seemed to be more about a tailoring behavior, where if somebody didn't believe, this would be a way for them to get themselves in the habit of believing. Was kind of one of his original reasons for having it. And that has its own issues with some of our modern understandings of psychology, but it's not as bad. It has fewer issues than just a false dichotomy does to me.
okay, well let's take it back to James. So, is that? Do you think we kind of covered the original argument, and we want to move to how you've modified it?
Yeah, I think that works well.
Okay.
So, oh, go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah. So, what inspired you to like? Let's go with. You can either present it, or we can kind of go with like what inspired you to come up with a new one, what you thought was wrong with the original argument. Either way, let's.
So I think, yeah, the biggest problem I see with the original, so I mean, I used to be. I'll just stick with this. You don't get, like Sura said, you don't get Christianity and atheism as your only options. And so I thought, well, in the same way, I mean, so basically it'd be almost like trying to use the Kalam cosmological argument for the Christian God per se, or the Muslim God per se, even though it was originated with Muslims. Like, it doesn't actually give you reason to prefer the Muslim God based on the characteristics that you get from the cosmological argument if you grant it a sound. It doesn't give you a reason to believe in any particular God over any other God or gods. So that's where I was like, well, maybe what I should do is try to maybe make this a little bit more modest in its goal. And so maybe we should just give it as an argument for theism. Maybe you should opt for one of the religions out there that, not necessarily Christianity, but anything's better than atheism in terms of the practical utility that you might get in the potential afterlife or non-afterlife. So I think it avoids the objection of the false dichotomy Cyrus mentioned. And, a lot of the objections that people bring up, I mean, like I've studied this, I think I'll let other people bring up whatever objections they want. So, yeah.
So it's more just about afterlives in general. Like you're kind of taking a step back from the Christian exclusive aspect and just saying. But I mean, I guess the same objection would apply is that Christianity and Islam. There's a few others. I think Mormonism.
Yeah,
encounters Christianity.
there's a few religions that have, or just a few God beliefs in general, because you could there's a bunch of different versions of Christianity, so we just tout them under Yahweh, Allah. Um, a lot of the more exclusionary religions do have the issue of belief versus non-belief, but there are some polytheistic faiths that don't necessarily have an issue of belief versus non-belief, at least in terms of an afterlife.
It's controversial because, say, I was Edward Butler was a polytheist PhD that I was talking to about not this subject, but a similar one about afterlives and what does that mean for like atheism and so on. And his position was that the idea of the afterlife would be that if you spend your life as a polytheist or as a Christian, developing yourself spiritually in a relationship with a deity of one kind or another. So, say Christian spends their life developing their spirituality through Jesus. I spend my life developing my spirituality through Thor. The as like a main god that I would follow, and then the afterlife would be that you go to that god's hold. So a Christian would go to heaven, and I might go to Thor's hold, rather than Helheim, and that an atheist would wind up going to Helheim not as a punishment, but because they hadn't invested spiritually in any deity.
It'd basically be the default area that they would go at that point.
Right. It's like, and again, a lot of polytheistic religions have this, so like a catch-all. It's not a punishment, but it's not the fruit of an investment either. So, that might be the way to make the argument work.
There's also
for his end. Does that make sense, Cyrus? That would go to his favor. And how he's doing it, or
it goes in the favor. But if if you're trying to use it as an argument to say that, you know, a belief position in a type of theism is better in X amount of cases than an atheistic position, yet there are beliefs where an atheistic position doesn't even lead to a punishment. It just leads to a default like Helheim, which isn't even really that bad.
And it doesn't lead to non-existence.
Yeah, it doesn't lead to annihilation.
Right.
Then at that point, the wager loses a lot of its power, because for one, the stick of the carrot on the stick is gone. You've only got the carrot, and two, there's a lot of different sized carrots now, and everybody might get a carrot. I mean, does that seem like it solves it?
Tends to kind of roughen up a lot of these arguments that tend to be found within Christianity, because it thinks differently than Christianity and Islam. Your cat came to visit. Now mine is. Yeah. I guess James, what do you think about?
Well, I don't think it actually does roughen it up at all. So here's why.
Sure.
Is that so? If I understand right, the optimal strategy, like in decision theory terms, in these polytheistic types of religions or spiritualities you're talking about, would still be to be like, it's true, you as an atheist, you might not get hammered in hell, but the optimal strategy is still to be like a devout polytheist, right?
Piety rewards you in the afterlife, according to some.
So yeah.
So the problem with when you throw polytheism into the mix, one of the issues that you have is that there's not like an inherent book that you go to. There's a lot of different pieces and parts that are pulled together that are essentially kind of cobbled together because history wasn't kind to polytheism, the same way that it was to a lot of the monotheisms. So pulling their literature, it's a whole lot harder to establish a canon, whereas in Christianity, you obviously have like post-Nicene, you have the post-Nicene Gospels. You've also got the Gnostics, which is their own ideal, and then in Islam, you've got you have the Quran after dictation. They have established canons.
With also with Christianity, you have things like where people got together and tried to figure out what everybody officially should believe.
Mhm.
Whereas with polytheistic faiths, the closest thing to that was the Roman Senate deciding which gods were like part of the Religio Roma, like the official pantheon of Rome. But that wasn't supposed to be mean that the gods exist or that this was a right way of doing it or that gods that weren't on this list didn't exist. It was always seen as, well, these are the deities that Rome embraces, and there are others. It was,
Which is not that it's not that much different than how an individual works, because an individual would espouse a certain number of deities, but
Right.
not say that the
But there
other
are
ones
others.
are non-existent
Um,
within polytheism.
right. So, but I think that how it's working to James's favor is to use Edward Butler's argument that when you invest in a deity spiritually, and it's based on an assumption that that would be rewarded in the afterlife. That assuming that there is an afterlife, assuming that this God cares, that there would be a hold that you would wind up going to. But a lot of afterlife stories, especially in the Norse, there's some with holds, and that there is this idea of you going to certain holds of afterlives, but there isn't. There seems to be like a story of you go to see your family, that you're greeted by your ancestors who toast to you and drink to you, which it doesn't seem to. That makes some sense, but it also makes it's like, well, does that mean all of your ancestors followed the same deity, or is there a way for them all to meet? Is everybody restricted to this hold? Are you separated by the gods? So there's a lot of questions on that matter regarding the polytheist afterlife. It's one of the reasons why I'm agnostic on it. But what, like, does that advantage work out to be an advantage in a way that it works for Pascal's argument? If you're going to be generalizing it to say to theism, because it's the afterlife, it winds up leaving philosophical theism and going into different traditions, I think,
And
rather
if
than.
And if it's talking strictly theism, then you've actually left out a lot of religions now too, like your atheistic Buddhists who might believe in something more akin to a reincarnation.
That's true.
There's monkey wrenches that kind of fall in and out of that.
There's an afterlife in there as well, and they still acknowledge like a greaterness of the self often enough.
Their God would align. Their idea of the universe would be closer to like a Spinozian type of deal, where like if there's a
spiritual spin on it,
the spiritual Spinoza's God is what you would get there. But even it's still not a type of theism. At that point, it's still atheistic with reincarnation flavor.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts, James? We're throwing out a lot of ideas. Actually.
Sorry.
Yeah. So yeah, we could talk about all those. I guess I'll take them in order if I can remember most of them. So I would concede first, this wouldn't be an argument for theism, more so just that any religion's better than naturalistic,
right?
Irreligious atheism. How about that?
I think I'm agreeing with you that I think that this winds up being an argument to be religious or follow a spiritual tradition rather than to be a theist. I think. Does that make sense? That it's not an argument for theism, it's an argument for religion.
Yeah, exactly. Any religion's better than atheism.
Right.
Except atheism's not a religion.
Shh.
Hold on.
Let's not do that here.
Phrasing.
Why are we doing that?
I don't know if that phrase would imply
it still works though. There is.
It does.
Any boat is better than no boat.
Fair. It works there.
Right, yeah.
Even though no boat isn't a boat.
Sorry, I've just heard so many times evolution's a religion, atheism's a religion, that it's like a trigger word for me now. I'm just like Cirrus.exe has broke.
No problem. It's definitely, I know that a lot of people try to claim that. I don't. But anyway, so it's like, I get what you mean. And I would say that in all these cases, I think that response hopefully answers pretty much everything you guys brought up so far as potential problems, right?
Yeah, I think that, like, with Edward Butler, his because our conversation, without stating so, covered this version of Pascal's wager, that the atheist isn't necessarily punished. It's just that there's no return on investment.
Right.
And which you could phrase that from the atheist of like, well, what am I missing out on? Nothing that I was invested in. And or you could also look at it from the atheist of like, oh, well, I guess I'm not, there's something that I could get that I'm not getting. My version of that is often, because I think that I kind of use a version of this argument sometimes, where I think that investing in spirituality without like certainty can work out to be better than not doing so. But it depends on the person. That if that doesn't work for your life, then fine, don't invest in it. But you shouldn't be admonished for pursuing it if it does work out for your life. But I guess that's like a further back tweaking of what you're putting forward, I think.
We also have a super chat as well that I want to go and throw out there while we have a chance. From 0132-132, if there's any chance that there's a God that grants heaven to atheists, then regardless of its value, it renders Pascal's wager impossible to rationally assess without a utility function. Except we're not really talking about a heaven for an atheist, because the idea of a heaven is like a perfect, whereas Helheim is more of like a default.
Yeah, and Helheim's not. It's not a place of punishment. It's more of a place of existence, and to some, it's a place of preparation for reincarnation. That's a thought. That's not backed up by the sagas or anything. Well, it is actually. There's some passages that people use in order to support that, but it's not like it's not like you're not heathen if you don't believe that. You know what I mean? So
Clade Starfish brought up a point. Meeting ancestors in some cases might just be considered the punishment.
Well,
right.
Do you want a response to like the super chat? And that's an objection.
Yeah, if you want to bring it up. I was trying to respond to it myself. Go for it.
But if you guys want to respond to the objections, you could. But I think that, given that I'm familiar with, like, I think I've read a little bit about this argument, I might be able to offer an answer. So that's definitely in the literature. I don't think it's a problem, though. I think it ultimately actually, be open to this. I know that this at first is going to seem repugnant to you probably, but be open. I want you to consider that I could actually be right about this, because I think that you're going to find that I am.
Be careful.
So, and I'm not trying to be smug, forgive me, but I've thought through this a lot.
Here we go.
I think that,
I got it. I got the hammer ready. Let's go. Let's do it.
Okay, good. So I'm okay with it. So I've heard that objection a lot. My response has been a couple of things. The first one, the one that I think is more embarrassing for the skeptic, and I mean that in a playful way. It actually, if you take that form of reasoning, so basically probability theorists would say you take two different outcomes. Let's say that there's like the supernatural or not supernatural. All things being equal, if you have no evidence, you have no reason to lean one way or the other, you should actually be just agnostic, like uncertain. You should just, well, if I have no reason to doubt it. Right. And you might say, well, no, I think that, unicorns and leprechauns is just ridiculous. Well, then if you want to use that as an argument, that's a reason to lean toward the supernatural. So the point, though, is if you have no arguments, if you have nothing, no reason to lean one way or the other, you should be at 50-50. And so let's say, broadly speaking, you assign, now some of you wouldn't even give it this much, but let's say for the sake of easy numbers, you assign a religion. Let's say you're like, well, I think Christianity is so unlikely, but I give it like 2 probability points out of my 100 possible probability points that I disperse among all the different possibilities, right?
Sure.
Makes sense, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So you're like, I give Christianity 2, which is obviously that wouldn't render belief. Like, let's say we need a probability of maybe 75% in order to believe something, as you know, where that's where we're like, yeah, once our probability hits 75, like you can call that a belief. Mm-hmm. So 2%, you're still a total skeptic, but you're like, because some people might say, well, I give Christianity a 0%. You shouldn't do that, and the reason is just that from what I've read or heard in lecture or talking to friends in decision theory, you shouldn't assign a 0 probability to something unless it's a literal contradiction. Like that, you should save that for just things that are. So, for example, like a married bachelor, like you got a 0% probability of running into one of those.
A lot of people make those arguments for that, but you know, we can grant that Christianity doesn't have that and assign it at least 2 points.
Okay.
Yeah.
So with that, we say, okay, well, let's say we give. Let's say we say that the other, for the sake of easy numbers, that other remaining 98%, we would say like that I usually think of as like there's no evidence of a God, right? Like, let's say there's a total absence of evidence for a God, and therefore I assign that 98% like atheism. Mm-hmm. Would that be fair to say?
Yeah, sure. If we're
just going to take the two options,
going with the dichotomy, yeah.
Yeah, if we want to take just the dichotomy, then I'm okay with that. Again, I think that there's more options there. Ocean thinks there's more options there, but I can grant it. Let's go.
Obviously, I think there's more options.
Well, yeah. How about we'll do it this way, because it's just so you know that I'm not trying to trick you with some sort of dichotomy. Let's say that 2%, all the theistic religions are like crammed into that 2%. They have to split it in their own.
So it's not just Christianity that you're putting in the 2%.
But yeah, so just so you guys don't feel like I'm trying to put you.
I'm not. I was ready to work with Christianity.
Okay, I'm ready to work with it too.
Okay.
I can espouse. I'm not a person who I've had on my channel.
I'll even be the one to say this so that we can do it. Is that you have those 2 points in Christianity? We'll say that we assign 1 point to the rest of the religions, and then the rest of it is atheism.
Okay, that works. Yeah, we can do that. Okay, so at that point we might say, well, this you might say my probability of this. God who hides itself and rewards atheists. We could say, what's your probability of that being the case? Well, what you should do is you should say like, well, what would be evidence for that? And so the evidence might be like, well, I don't really have any reason to think that there would be that type of God would present any type of universe different than the one that I'm observing, namely, in Cyrus's point of view, one in which there is an absence of evidence for God, right? Like, how do you distinguish those? That's what I'm saying is, unless you have a good reason to say, oh, well, I actually think that we have a reason to, among that 98% in which we think of the world as having no evidence of a God, why do we assign, we should, if without any other reason, we should split it 50-50, right?
So there's one point of contention I would have there. If, like, let's say you have the skeptic who says that there's no evidence for any God. Obviously, there's evidence for gods. Whether or not you find it compelling, that's its own thing. Again, if we refer to something like the Kalam, then there's evidence for God. Whether you can find it compelling, I don't personally find it compelling.
People that are bringing up the God that he's talking about, though, like a hidden God that rewards atheists, might not agree with that, though. So there's one of the reasons why I kind of want to grant some things is because I think that there is an atheist that puts forward those kind of arguments. I've never seen that argument put forward by somebody who like believes that personal experience is good evidence or something like that, or that agrees with the Kalam. So I think that what the argument that he's putting forward as far as addressing the atheist, this like hypothetical atheist God would be put forward by somebody who wouldn't hold the objections you just put forward, Cyrus. Does that make sense? Like we're talking about somebody who's assigned 2 points to Christianity, 1 point to another religion, and then
this is somebody who's not going to even grant that the Kalam can work for anything at that point.
Right.
No, that's fair. The only reason that I bring that up, my issue is that are we assigning the 1% as only the gods that have been conceptualized, or are we leaving room for gods that have not been conceptualized?
We just put all other religions in the 1%. The 1% is that 1% is like a catch-all for everything else just so that we can have Christianity with 2%.
Okay, so we continue then.
Yeah,
Okay, so it sounds like we don't have any problems so far, right?
correct.
Okay, so we're kind of in the same boat then so far. Now, like I said, if we want to say like, oh, hey, but we don't know it. Like if you're like, hey, this is a real possibility, I assign it a non-zero probability, which probability theorists would say, yeah, you should assign the idea of a God that rewards atheists. And, it's apparently hidden, right? Because atheists would say that if he exists, there's not good evidence for him or, but you get my point that
It should be assigned 0.
Well, no. It shouldn't be assigned 0. I would say that it's fair to do a non-zero probability like assignment for it. What I'm saying though is that we should remember that you're saying like the way I view the world, that 98% of remaining probability points or 97, whatever it is, you're saying like that's the one. The reason you'd assign that to atheism,
Right.
but why would you assign it 97% to atheism rather than splitting that 97 right down the middle and saying I assign half of that 97 to genuine atheism and the other half to this type of theism in which the God is there but hiding and rewards atheists?
Because each of them would manifest the same way, wouldn't it?
Exactly.
Right. Is this a scenario where Is this a scenario where the types of atheism are going to divide themselves infinitely until you have 2 as the larger number?
Well, no, I'm only saying that if you have, like, remember the 97% probability points, like those are the ones that you're like, I don't ascribe those to any of these, theistic religions. I would keep these to atheism. And I'm saying you have no reason and no way in which you could discern whether or not those 97 percentage points are evidence for atheism or evidence of a God who hides itself but rewards atheists.
Right. So we can.
So both versions of atheism are sitting at about 48-ish%. We can continue from there.
I want to agree with this. Yeah. Let's they
continue.
sit around 48-ish%, and so now we have less than 50% for atheism, right?
Exactly.
That's where we're at.
Yeah. So now you're over 50% for thinking that there is
that there's a God. Oh my.
There's a God.
I love that. Okay. All right. So you wound up with over 50% for there's a God. Is that where we're at? Yeah.
Yeah. And so you could bring up this type of argument, but I think it has the unfortunate cost that most atheists don't want to concede, which is that theism is more probable than atheism.
Right. That's funny, and it would be using a trick that I've seen atheists bring up. That one, I haven't seen a Christian respond the way that you just did.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that the way you responded would be hilarious.
That's fair. It does come up with one problem though.
What's that?
So we agreed that the 2 different types of atheists in the 97%, the split down the middle, would manifest exactly the same way, correct?
Right.
Okay. So you still have 97% atheists that are manifesting exactly the same way, not believing in a God.
Right. There's also, it winds up with still, the person doesn't believe in Christianity, but it does, and this winds up with, I think a lot of atheists might actually think this way because how many times have you heard, Cyrus, an atheist say, well, I'm not going to say there isn't a God, but like there isn't something possibly, but that it's not that one. It's not the Christian one. I think that what James put forward there could be a good workout for starting the conversation of like why it might make sense to posit a God. But I think that an atheist that's good at the probability argument might respond, well, I wouldn't divide it 50-50 with there being a God versus a hiding God versus there not being a hiding God, because there's so many other ways that we could see things manifesting as there being of having no experience.
Yeah, because all you would have to do is have.
So you could divide it up into 3 or 4 different ways of there not being a God, and you still
just have a 51% on the atheist side still of saying that there is no God.
Once if you provide enough examples. If you
Because
provide two examples that don't have a God of the universe manifesting as atheism, then you wind up with 75% of no God or 72.
Yes. And as soon as you've done that, you've used your exact argument to defeat your argument or defeat the purpose of your argument.
Right.
Because at that point it's using your probability and your numbers. And now we're left in a scenario where your probability and your numbers undermine the purpose of your argument.
Thing with the hidden God and just say, well, it's the same God but with a hat this time.
I think the issue comes down. I think the issue comes down. Any way you want to divide these, any way you want to divide any of the categories, ultimately becomes arbitrary. Because it
doesn't.
It kind of does, because the way Ocean just posited it, literally
you have the same not God with a hat.
Yeah, any way you divide this. You can divide it any number of infinite ways to work on either argument. For instance, if you provide the...
I understand what you're saying, but I'm saying that, I mean, you can continue. I've been through this before. Like, I know where you're going. I understand, like, the objection. There's no confusion on it. It's just that probability theorists would say that's not the right way to partition.
Can we get a probability theorist in to do that?
I mean, I don't think we're going to be able to do that right now.
I mean,
no, we're not going to do it right now. I'm just doing that as a... That's my go-to whenever I hear something, like when I hear... As an example, I'm not comparing you to like a virulent young Earth creationist, because I like you. Like, you're not that type of person. But when somebody in that camp says, "Well, the science agrees with me," I'm like, "Can we get a scientist in who agrees?" That's usually going to be my go-to there.
Right. So, I mean, we could. Well, I mean, if you want, I would.
Can you explain a little bit about how it would work? Like, why wouldn't you be able to put forward like the atheist God with a hat and maybe the atheist God with a hat that has a hat?
Yeah.
Divide it up equally.
Yeah. So what you should do in that case is you wouldn't divide up like all of atheism. You would divide up let's say, what is it, like 48%. That would be partitioned. But you wouldn't divide up like all of the 97 percentage points. You just start with those different alternatives of like a God who hides himself and rewards atheists, who wears a red hat versus one that wears a blue hat, a purple hat, no hat.
Right.
You would divide up your 98 percentage points that ascribe that there's a God who hides itself. Those are the ones you'd divide up. So you'd partition still. That's true. Like, you're absolutely right. But you wouldn't partition across the 97.
The middle feels arbitrary, though.
Oh no, but
right. We're only splitting down the middle on that front because it was the first thing that we put forward.
Right. It doesn't negate your original partition, because your original partition wasn't arbitrary. It was, remember, we said we have no way in which we discern one from the other. So we were justified in that splitting it down the middle in the initial partition. And then we come up with all these different alternatives: blue hat, red hat, no hat. And then we don't go back to the original partition. That one was justified in splitting 50-50. Now we have to split 50, or maybe not 50-50. It might be, however many millions of ways. We split up our 48 points of the hiding God.
I think I see, because like, let's say that T-Jump comes in and says it's instead it's naturalistic pantheism. And how would we do? And we divide up. I'm going to use it. It's going to be fun. That T-Jump comes in and he says it's naturalistic pantheism, and then we divide it. Divide it that way, and then we start talking about the God thing. Do we divide it into thirds, or do we divide it into 50-50 again, into where not God on one side and God on the other, and still wind up with above 50%? When the original partition, the first partition that we take is that there's a naturalistic pantheist law, and nothing like that, pure atheism.
Is this one in which the pantheist hides or I should say,
well,
yes,
a naturalistic pantheism? I don't think that even entails a God at all, does it?
Yeah, they don't appeal to experience.
Yeah.
Okay, so there's no God. This sounds like a type of atheism, right?
You know what? You could probably reduce it to just being atheism, couldn't you?
Right.
So, like, it's different enough to where they don't really consider it atheism, because the undiscoveredness but it's still naturalist. So
Moreover, there's another type of split that I think that could be had. And this is one that
we're
would
trying to
get
figure out
people
a way to
upset.
put it in thirds, aren't we?
Well, not trying to figure out a way to put it into thirds, but if you want to have atheism as your split, then why wouldn't the first split for atheism be a split between positive atheism and lack theism?
Oh, because they manifest the same way to a point where it's meaningless. Lacktheism isn't an assertion of a position.
But I thought
So
the
wouldn't
two
be
positions
included.
manifesting the same way didn't work
Well,
for the manifesting of the atheist that provided an option for a God existing.
the belief manifests in the same belief. It doesn't.
Does the atheist
doesn't
that
hold
think
a
there's an
position.
option for a God existing believe in that God? If they are an
No.
atheist.
No.
So if it manifests the same way, you can't arbitrarily say that it doesn't work one way, but it does work the other way. If the argument's going to
No,
be the
because
same both
okay.
ways, you're
So the
locked in the same problem, Ocean.
I think we found the thing where Cyrus and I might disagree on something. So, here's what I'm going to do. The atheist that's putting forward that there's a God that provides heaven for all atheists, is a proposition.
Is that hold on? Is that
Wait,
even an atheist?
Let me make the point.
Okay.
So the atheist God that provides a heaven for atheists, that's a proposition. The atheist that says there is no God, that's a proposition. This is where lacktheism doesn't wind up being able to divide it in another way, because it's not a proposition. It's a belief proposition. It's not a truth proposition. Something else. So they're not putting forward, like, this is one of the reasons why lacktheists get frustrating in debates, because they're not defending anything.
Because they have a non-position.
Right. So, and it being a non-position, it wouldn't even hold a 0%. It wouldn't hold any, like, it wouldn't be applicable to having a percentage at all. So it wouldn't even register as 0. It would just be irrelevant. Does that make sense?
That's fair. That would be fair. But then you still run into the issue where all you're positing is that it is more rational by essentially an arbitrary number divide for theistic belief.
It's not arbitrary. It's 50-50 because there's 2 options right now. They each have equal standing.
Oh, there's 4 options right now.
But you can
there's
subdivide them
Christianity-
into God belief and non-God belief.
Yeah, and if you subdivide them into just God belief and non-God belief, now anybody can fall on either side of this and they're equally rational.
Right. I mean, the atheist that believes in a God that hides. Well, okay. Here's how you might be able to force the.
Because it feels like granting any one when you're dealing with probabilities.
The problem might be that the atheist that's putting forward a God that hides, that provides a heaven for atheists, winds up with being far more claims than someone saying there's no God. So there's no God is one claim. A God that hides
is one claim.
That also provides a heaven for atheists, there's a second claim.
Yep.
It's 3 claims really, because there's a God that hides that has a heaven for atheists.
Now you have to split it even more.
Right.
Because now you've got multiple claims to deal with. Because if we're going down on truth claims, not on belief, now the probabilities have to be split any number of ways. And granted, I will grant that in this particular model, it does grant at least more towards theism.
It does. Yeah.
And that's fair.
Because you would just subdivide God belief into those other claims. Like, so you can have an atheist God that ignores everything. And I think that God exists, but he ignores things would wind up with that. Then you would subdivide that into God exists, but ignores everything and also provides heaven for atheists.
Mm.
What do you think? We're throwing out a lot of things, James. What do you think so far?
Yeah.
Are we kind of on the right track, or are you?
Yeah, I think so. I think we're pretty much in agreement. Like, we seem to agree that. So I used to do a judo. Used to do judo, and there's sometimes, I think it was, if I remember, it was like a suicide throw was one in which you'd give up your originally planned throw, and the reason is you're going to do this other type of throw that would make you vulnerable, but you were still throwing the other person. You were putting them in a position they didn't want to be in, so you were willing to do it. So my point is just that this Service is right in his original assertion that this objection of the atheist favoring God, like if I don't give a further response, if I just give you this response that I've given you so far, you've actually defeated my contemporary wager. But I'm okay with it because I'm like, well, but you've also, it looks like you boxed yourself into the corner of thinking theism's more probable. So I'm kind of like, okay, like I don't really care about the wager that much anyway. I got you to be think that theism's more probable.
Fair, but you've also not changed anybody's mind.
Well,
that winds
yeah,
up,
I mean, well,
like you
but,
wind up having a technical victory, but you don't win somebody's soul, I guess.
well, right. It's true that you could even say that they don't believe in Christianity because, like we said, let's say belief, we don't call a probability a belief until it reaches like 75%, let's say.
Well, see,
Right.
and remember originally though that the entire reason
The
we went
hiding
down.
God is just part
Oh,
of the
boy.
1%
There's
of
the
other
robot
gods,
voice.
not the atheist category.
Oh,
I didn't.
Yeah.
The hiding God
Soon
is
as the
I don't
robot
hear it
the
either,
wrong
but
category.
Cirrus is the only one that hears
It's
it, but it is being
irrelevant if
broadcast.
the
It means
God
that I'm
appears
going
like
crazy.
atheism.
Yes.
Terrence Clark says that the hiding God is just part of the 1% of other gods, not the atheist category. The hiding God is divided along the wrong category. It's irrelevant if that God appears like atheism. I don't know, because technically deism would fall under that, and deism is under the umbrella of theism, not under atheism. That'd be my personal take on that one, though. My thing is, though, is that in this particular conversation, remember that we went down the rabbit hole because we were granting a lot of things for a hypothetical probability
Right.
assessment. So you can accept a technical. If you accept a technical because somebody engaged in a hypothetical, then you've technically not really won a whole lot.
Well, okay. So as far as the granting those positions, we were granting those positions because we've seen people argue that.
Right. Well,
That-
my point
so-
is, so I mean, you guys have got alternatives. I mean, obviously, it doesn't bother Ocean as much, but the atheists, like, so and I could give a response to that last one. That just arbitrarily, I mean, that doesn't answer the question that Ocean and I originally posited, because this person says, well, you should just throw the hiding God into the remaining 1% of possible gods that you think might exist. Well, but that's just arbitrary. That would be by blind faith just tossing it in there, because remember, Cirrus and I raised the objection of, how do you know that a world that looks like atheism isn't any more evidence for atheism, genuine atheism, than a world in which there's a hiding God? Like, that doesn't answer the question, and that's why we said you
And
split the partition 50.
Polytheism, like the other religions, would be predicated on personal experience, which the hypothetical person that's assigning these would be giving the personal experience arguments 1%, and instead going with like some, like I would disagree with the percentage assignments, obviously, because I weight different arguments differently than this person would, but but the hiding God would manifest itself in the same way as a purely atheistic universe. So probabilistically, you probably would have to divide that remainder up. I don't think that's the point that where I'm disagreeing with James. I think we agree on how probability works on that. So
I can give myself an even smaller number if need be.
how did you what?
So, what's the standard? There's a standard saying that is said in the atheist community a lot, like the whole like, oh, there's 4,000 gods. How did you come to the right one? That type of deal.
Yeah.
Even though they're,
I just believe in one God less than you do.
Yeah,
Which they can't say to me.
Yeah, and because you're just like, I believe in all of them. So my take on that, and this is the reason why I don't like that particular argument, is if somebody says that, oh, well, there are 4,000 gods, how did you figure out which one's right? I was like, okay, well, that's neat, but if that's the case, we just assign equal probability to all of those propositions, and now your proposition of...
Now atheism is like...
Now atheism
1%.
is a percentage of a percentage.
Right.
But that percentage of a percentage is equal to literally every other claim.
My problem with that is that assumes a million monotheisms rather than polytheism as a block.
Mm-hmm.
Because like if you assigned a percentage to Thor, and another percentage to Odin, and another percentage to Apollo, and another percentage to Zeus, and another percentage to Ta. Like,
And
that
yet most
wouldn't-
people who would espouse any of those gods would not even follow that percentage.
right? It would be like, well, we believe in Ta and,
Yeah.
rather than simply Ta. Like, well, actually, Ta is a terrible example for that. Ra, where there are monotheists that believe in Ta. So, Anubis might be a better example, because we don't have like Anubis as a lone belief. We have Anubis as a belief in combined with other gods, and then also not chasing away the belief necessarily of something like Odin. So, when you're dividing things up in the probability setup that you had, you would still look at non-exclusive polytheist beliefs as almost a block. Maybe not. Maybe it might be a way to subdivide it still, but it would be like a because you do have people that believe exclusively in like a pantheon. So you might be able to divide it up that way, but then there's more than 100 pantheons in the world, so you might be able to get atheism to a percentage of a percentage in that sense. And then also include generalized polytheism as like trying to subsume all the other percentages. I don't know. I don't know how you would set it up probabilistically if you have something that like includes belief in other things.
I think the best thing to do
that becomes a fun
it's
experiment.
a really fun thought experiment. I think the best thing to do, and this would be my challenge to James, because because I know that I'm not a probability theorist. And I'm fairly certain that Ocean's not. I don't know everything about his life. I don't know what he did last week. He probably got a PhD last week, and I don't know.
I did.
Oh, damn.
Yeah. PhD in kicking your. I'm just kidding.
I mean, if you want to do that, how's that shoulder treating you?
Yeah, it's better.
So, I did not injure Ocean's shoulder, by the way. Just so nobody.
I screwed up my shoulder in a boxing match. It was not. It sucked. Anyway,
so my challenge to James would be, especially because you have said that probability theorists would agree with the way you are assessing this. I would suggest, if we can find, I'm pretty sure we can, somebody who's got at least a master's in probability theory. If you'd be willing to go on to like non sequitur or something with them, or even on here with them, and bring up your argument to them and see if they agree with your argument. And they can be
or find a way out of it.
Or find a way out of it. That would be
it might
the
be
other
that
thing.
they agree with all the premises, but then be like, well, no, here's an objection, because like that's where like a lot of these philosophy conversations go.
And I'd say that there's two scenarios that come out of that. Either scenario one, you would find that the argument has flaws that are easily dealt with, and then can refine the argument, which was the whole purpose of creating the argument in the first place. It was a refining of a previous method. It would let you refine the argument further. Scenario two, they agree with you, and you go, okay, cool, I'm right.
Right.
I don't think there's a bad scenario
right?
there.
Yeah, I mean, I'm open to that. Like, I've discussed this on like in a number of venues, and it sounds like we would agree that like it sounds like we're all in the same boat, namely that if you want to use this, so like if we take like a meta response to this whole conversation so far, because it's been largely like for the last half hour probably dominated by the hiding God idea.
Yeah.
Is my advice is, and I'm not trying to sound smug when I say that. I'm just saying like none of this, like so far it looks like we're all in the same boat, and I would press you like what would be the so I can give, well, if you want a master student product, I can give you like a peer-reviewed source that at least has an instantiation of this principle that I'm talking about with probability partitions. Like I've got the peer-reviewed paper right in front of me. So like I could give you that. But I mean, like, I don't see, so my thought is like, if you guys want to, like, if a person want to keep pressing on this, I think they're going to lose. I would just use a different objection to the wager. And by lose, I don't mean like they've shown the wager. Like I said, this actually does take out the wager, but they lose in the sense that they have to, to be consistent, they have to say that theism is more probable than atheism. But I mean, getting back into the weeds, like the details of it, I could find you peer-reviewed sources. Like I've heard a lecture. I mean, like this is something that I've heard in a lecture. Like this isn't like my own conjecturing.
That's what I assumed.
I've also gone through apologetics lectures and several.
No, this was like a secular lecture. This isn't apologetics.
No, I'm saying
I assumed that he was talking. He was taking something that was because what I've in my conversations with Steve, what you're saying sounds familiar to me.
Mm-hmm. And I'm not saying that it was an apologetics lecture. I'm saying that I've listened to lectures where everything sounded correct.
Well, you said apologetics lecture, and I think you were going to say I've listened to apologetics lectures where everything sounded correct, and then I looked at it and I heard, and I'm like, no, this isn't apologetics. That's not.
Well, it doesn't matter if it's apologetics or if it's secular. It's a lecture then.
All right. Well, I would ask you. I mean, Suris, why would you not partition them equally when you have no reason to prefer one over the other? So let me put the ball in your court. Sure. I mean, you seem to be really reluctant to answer, or you don't have any answer. You've never given any answer for why you reject it or why you're so skeptical of it, even though it's the common sense interpretation. So what's your alternative?
Well, first of all, I hold objection with saying the common sense interpretation. I'm already going to have objective with that verbiage.
Okay, so, well, here, Suris, tell me why we wouldn't split them equally when you have no reason to prefer one over the other. And forgive me, I'm not trying to sound snarky. It's just that
you're asking for an argument.
No, and that's fine.
This skepticism is so strong, even though I'm kind of wondering why.
Well, the thing is that if you have a 97% in the atheism category, atheism with a chance of a hidden god or atheism with no chance of a hidden god, even if you split those down the middle, you're still landed with a 97% of atheism. You still have that.
The question would come up is a hiding god that provides a heaven for atheists meaningful as being a point for theism generally? And would it be affected by arguments for theism in general to place it into a subcategory like the 1% or the 2% that we were looking at earlier? Because in order for there to be a hidden god of atheists that provides a heaven for atheists, we assume that there's some argument for that. Is there something else this god does, or is it just like, is it independent of even the creation of the universe? Is it independent of the universe? Is there any way of verifying it whatsoever? So what arguments support it? And if you're going to be assigning the probability based on arguments that support it rather than no evidence, then that's the reason why I wouldn't divide it up equally, is because but then again, I also agree with certain theistic arguments. So and I do consider arguments to be evidence. The person that we're thinking about that this argument would work on would be somebody who doesn't view these arguments, general logical arguments, as evidence, and yet this logical argument would work on them because of just like rules of how probability works. That being said, is the hidden god for atheism supported by something like the Kalam? Does that increase or decrease its probability rating? At which point would you be able to assign it something as high as 50% when something that is supported by the Kalam is assigned less than that?
And the issue when you get into stuff like that.
Sir, you already first you spoke, then Ocean speaks, then you speak again. When do I respond? If you wanted to have a fair conversation on this. So my only
it's not a debate, so that's not exactly a thing on the table.
Okay,
but let's let him respond.
Well, I mean, but there are other cases, things like conversations just being fair in terms of a person trying to hammer out or not hammer out Pascal's wager, like just a discussion. Like, I mean, it doesn't have to be.
Go ahead with your point.
It doesn't have to be a debate for me to want it to be fair. But anyway, my only thought is, I think Surus originally said like it should be 97% atheism. He just claimed it. That's just
No,
arbitrary.
that was your numbers.
Well, I'm
I'm
saying
working
whatever,
with your numbers the whole way
I've,
through.
I've done the math before, so whatever number you pick, this is what's going to happen. Go ahead, pick your own number, Surus. Let's try it.
We just worked with the 97. It's your argument. I'm going to work with your numbers.
I'm agreeing with Cyrus on the I don't think criticizing his 97 makes a lot of sense when we went with it was part of the premises of your position. So
no, I'm not criticizing him because he like chose 97. I'm saying that if I understood Cyrus right, he had said like 97%. Like I said, Cyrus, we have, if you assign 3% dispersed among these theistic religions, you have 97%. And there's like no reason to say that you should like, instead of partitioning it down the middle, because when you have no reason to believe otherwise, which you originally granted, we said that if you have no reason to go one way or the other, you'd be agnostic on it. You'd say, I'm not sure what the answer is. But if I understood you right, just a few moments ago, Cyrus, you had said that you would say it would be like 97% for genuine atheism rather than this God who hides itself. And that's just arbitrary. You can't just assert it. You need to give reasons.
Well, if genuine atheism and atheism with a probability of a hidden God manifest exactly the same, then are they not both atheism?
Well,
just as the 2%, if you have a 2% for Christianity, we're manifesting all the different denominations of Christianity as manifesting the same within that 2%. So why wouldn't the different types of atheism manifest the same?
One of them has a God in it.
So yeah, exactly. Is that probabilities are about possible?
Here's the thing.
Can I respond? You just asked me the question.
Okay,
can I answer
fine.
it? Okay. So I'm not trying to sound mean. Forgive me, Cyrus. Like I love you, and it's just that I'm trying to like push you in the same way that you push me, right?
That's fine.
Okay, so I know I'm being pretty like aggressive right now. I hope you forgive me and realize I'm not trying to.
Oh no, it's fine. You do you.
Okay. Probabilities are about possible states of the world. I think we're confusing the epistemology or like what looks to us like atheism. But remember, if there's a hiding God, that's a God who's hiding. So it's an actual God in that case. It's a version of theism. It's just a version in theism in which he's for some reason he or she's hiding itself. So that doesn't make sense to say that they're both atheism.
So here's an issue,
right?
Is an atheist who puts forward
the truth objection?
No, this is not a new objection. This is the same objection.
Well, why didn't you answer my question? Like if it's a hiding God, that's not atheism, correct?
James, I'm going to be very patient. Listen to me. Is an atheist who posits a hiding God or assigns a truth claim to it, whichever, is that an atheist?
If they think that there's a hiding God,
is that an atheist?
I'd say no.
Right, that would be no.
So then how did you divide it if it's still an atheist?
So, Cyrus, like,
or if it's not still
we're talking about how you divide your perception of a world in which there's an absence of evidence for a God. And by the way, you didn't answer my question, but I'm going to answer yours right now.
Well, go ahead and say your question one more time so that I might be able to answer. So
originally, like 5 minutes ago, you had said like, hey, there is either genuine atheism or there's this world where there's a hiding God, and but you don't see any evidence of it. There's like a complete lack of evidence. You said like, aren't those both atheism? And they said, no, like there's a God that's hiding in the second case, right? So they're not both atheism, like you said.
So an atheist, first let's go ahead and just define atheist so that I can answer that. So are you comfortable with the definition just an atheist is anybody who doesn't have a belief in God? Positive, negative, weak, strong, all of them fall into the category.
Probabilities are about states of the world, and a lack of belief is not a state of the external world. That's a psychological state that you have. When we are using atheism, in this
same
case,
objection I came up
we
with.
mean the scholarly definition like Steve McRae would use, which is one in which there's no God.
Okay. So...
Well, then, I guess the question would be, how are you dividing the claim of state of atheism?
Yeah, because if the claim is state of atheism...
Oh, because they manifest... Okay, so...
Yeah, one state of atheism manifests as the atheist believes there is not a God, and yet there is one. Another state of atheist, the atheist believes there's not a God, and yet there is not one. And then there's also the other numbers for the theists who believe there is a God, and yet there is one. It seems like there's one thing that's been left out. What about, is there any way or any reason that the theist would not also be divided in a similar manner? A theist that believes that there is a God and yet there is not one. That seems to be the one category missing.
I'd say no, because of the theist. The hypothetical person is assigning religious experiences, like traditions with religious experiences, into this 3%. So this would be something that does not have that problem. This would be something that is the logical positing that has all the same factors. And that's the reason why James is putting forward that it should be subdivided on the atheist side rather than on the theist side. Because the experience isn't there. It's just a logical positing with the same result that the atheist is positing as being the state of affairs. But there isn't a way to distinguish the two. Therefore, that's the one that should be split 50-50. Am I right, James? Is that accurate to what you're saying?
You would. So I agree with Suris that like the theist would split the different varieties of theism, and I'm not sure if I like tracked with you for the last part, but
that the reason why you're saying that it splits the atheist side, the hidden God proposition, is because to the person that the hypothetical person that we're talking about with the 97% atheism, the hidden God would manifest in the same universe in the same way that the atheist is proposing that the universe exists, that there wouldn't be a way for him to tell the difference between no God and hidden God. Therefore, the proposition that he's holding is the one that would be split rather than one of the other positions, which are things that this person obviously disagrees with.
Right.
They're experiential arguments. You wouldn't split the experiential argument on a proposition that doesn't have experiential arguments. You would split something that you would split the appearance of the case with a probabilistic argument. I'd be interested in seeing what Steve thinks about this. I want him to give his opinion to me after the show at some point.
I mean, forgive me. Like I don't mean to. Like I know that I've been aggressive and I've been really coming after you, Suris. Like I love you. Like I hope you know that I'm not trying to be a jerk.
Oh,
like,
nobody's mad here. Nobody's mad. I welcome it.
Like
if you want to challenge me in whatever method you wish to. That's fine.
James, if there's any point in this conversation where you think you're being treated unfairly or you're not being
no. Like
wait, hold on. Just say, can I cut in? That's all you gotta say, because we definitely want you to represent yourself here.
Yeah.
So that being said, I hand it back to you.
I just want you to know that I've thought so basically I'll freely openly admit, and I love Suris. I'm going after Suris because I'm saying I don't buy what you're selling. Not to say that it's like dumb or anything. Like I think you're bringing up reasonable ideas. It's just that I don't agree, and I hope you understand that I'm not trying to but I am trying to I'm trying to sometimes you'll notice that sometimes I'm like, no, Suris, let's go back to this original point. And the reason is just because sometimes I feel like it's like there's an objection brought up. I give a response to it, and then there's no response of oh, okay, I hadn't thought of it that way. It's more like, here's this new objection I have, and I'm like, okay, and it's just kind of are you more interested in just trying to find a response? And that's okay if you are trying to find a response to the argument that shows that it's not sound, or are you actually searching for truth with me here? And so that's kind of why I'm being coming after you, is I'm kind of are you sure that your atheist bias isn't kind of fueling you a little bit right now? Because I'll admit my theist bias is fueling me.
Yeah, your theist bias fueled you to the point where you were willing to bite a 2% probability on Christianity.
So okay, so
you were willing. You're willing to lose your heaven to win theism.
So the same way that after I've shown that each of your responses doesn't work, and you would just move on to the next one before conceding, oh, okay, James, you're right. the 97 wouldn't just be pure atheism, because a God that's hiding itself would actually be a version of theism. Like, would you admit that your atheist bias might be fueling your, so when I ask that question, you wouldn't answer it. Well, hold on a second. When I asked that question, you wouldn't answer it. Do you think your atheist bias might be fueling that at all?
Well, I tried to answer that like 2 seconds ago. So while I agree that my bias could be fueling that, for the same reason that your bias would be fueling your argument, this is why we find ourselves on opposite sides of the conversation. I have no issue with that being the case. I was a Christian for 23 years. It's very easy for me to find myself on the other side of the argument. What I would say, it's not that I'm trying to dodge any questions. If you give a question to me and I think I have an objection with it, then I'm going to posit my objection. If the objection doesn't seem like it follows from what you've said, then I apologize. But that has not been my intent.
Okay. And go ahead, sorry.
The reason that so if we're talking about states of the world, and we're not talking about any particular beliefs, any particular experiences, we're simply talking about states of the world. Is that correct? Yes or no?
That's right.
Okay. Then would not the two states of the world be either a deity has, let's just say for creation. We're not talking about afterlife. We're just going to stick with creation. That makes things very simple. For the sake of creation, does that not mean that the options are either there is a deity or there is not a deity?
Yeah.
Of some kind.
Right.
Okay. And the reason I say of some kind is it could be, God damn it, fuck chaos. Chaos can come into this.
Ha ha.
Damn it, Ocean. Fuck. Not okay.
Let's not allow polytheism to muck it up yet again. Go ahead with your position. I'll refrain from ruining you.
Yeah, it's just as I was thinking of it, I'm like deity, not deity, and then I'm like, we're talking about creation. Chaos is a thing,
right? Because chaos is not a deity, but
yes. But okay, and then if we're talking about afterlives, we're still dealing with an issue of either there is an afterlife or there's not an afterlife, irregardless of the subcategories.
Correct.
Okay. And then for the state of the world, regardless, let's say I have to make this specific because of a specific thing that I've said in the past. The state of the world is either that God or gods currently exist, or God or gods currently do not exist.
Correct.
Okay. Then if our argument is on state of the cosmos, not state of the world. I'm tired. But if the argument, Ocean, you've muted yourself.
Yes, I did. I'm going to go to the restroom real quick.
Okay. Cool.
Do you mean like is the goal of the argument to show that there is a God, or namely whether or not it's rational to believe in a God?
Here's the thing. First of all, you're dealing with an atheist that has said repeatedly it's rational to believe in a God. As far as I can tell, past the first 10 episodes of my channel, I've not made the claim that it's irrational to believe in a God. I think it's perfectly rational. But that's why the argument right now isn't about a claim, because if it's a claim of rationality, if we're just talking about the state of the world, then the state of the world is either a God has been there or God is not there in some form or fashion. And I hate that I'm walking around Matt Slick's road right now because I know that this is something that he's said before. Kind of bugs me, actually. But would that not mean that probabilistically, if we're not talking about beliefs, if we're not talking about individuals in any sense, then we still find ourselves in a 50-50 scenario?
Of whether or not there's a God?
Of whether or not there's a God.
No. And the reason is we have reasons, though. So you would give, some atheists would give the problem of evil, and that is actually a reason to, there's debate over whether or not it be sound, but assuming one of them sound, that would be a reason to actually think that the probability of a God existing is smaller than 50%.
Well, one particular God. I'm saying God in any sense.
Let's see. So we could answer this, but I just want to point out that holding your feet to the fire again, I never got an answer to my question where I said we initially seemed to agree that if we have no reason to believe otherwise, it's just kind of like what you're saying now. If we have no reason to go one way or the other, agnosticism is the right position. And I asked you, why wouldn't it be? And the responses you gave, I never found a fulfilling answer, you still haven't answered that. It seems like you're changing the subject a little bit, and not to be evasive, like not to deceive anybody, but I can understand, like, if you don't have an answer for it, why like, wouldn't, is that, like, would you be willing to concede you don't have an answer for that question?
So before we do that, a super chat just came in. It says evidence for and existence of a deity are independent variables. This only works if they're dependent.
I don't know if I mean, that technically is true. Like, there can be evidence of something and then it still not be the case that is the case. But
anyway,
yeah, just it's
answer what
the
modern day debates.
Okay,
because I had like half agree with it too.
So, if the question is, let me phrase your question myself so that I'm steel manning it correctly. So, if the question is, if there's no reason to believe one way or another, why ought we not split the probability down the middle and just take agnosticism? Correct?
Right, because I think that's what we all initially agreed on.
Okay,
So
and then we've agreed that all arguments for and against the existence of God do not fall into here at all, because we're talking about state of the world, not individual beliefs. Correct?
We're saying, like, if we have no reason to believe one way or the other, namely such as arguments.
Okay. Then if we're only dealing with the states of the world, if we take your original numbers, I'm fine with dividing halfway down. I'll accept that that's a perfectly reasonable thing to do in order to answer your question. Because if you can only be agnostic on the situation, then you're firmly in the middle between P and not P. I'm willing to accept that is the case. Because if you're agnostic, that's default going to be the case. Then my subscribers lambast me, that's not what agnostic means, and then I throw Huxley at them. Anyway,
you literally pick up Huxley and throw him.
Yes.
Like his
all of his written works. Phew.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, no, I'm not gonna go like grab Thomas Huxley.
Cyrus is now a gravedigger.
Just beat people with his corpse. No. I'm fine dividing down the middle. And the original reasons that I objected before of why would you go down the middle was because originally I misunderstood what you had said, because I thought, since we began this with proposition of Christianity or monotheism in one, proposition of polytheism, and then proposition of atheism, the whole reason that I took objection is because the proposition of monotheism and the proposition of polytheism and the proposition of hidden God, to me, seem to be identical, because it would mean state of the universe where God exists.
Okay.
Rational to believe state of the universe where God exists.
Okay.
That's the reason why I was making the distinction between creator.
Thanks for answering that. I didn't mean to, like, I'm not trying to be a jerk. I just
no, if you think that I've dodged a question or anything like that, hold my feet to the fire.
And I know you weren't planning on this being a debate, and I've like turned it into a debate.
Not necessarily. It's still a conversation. It's a conversation in which we disagree, but that's fine.
Well, it doesn't sound like we do disagree. I think so far you guys would both agree that if you use the hiding God objection against the wager, it seems to lead you to thinking that theism is more probable than atheism. We agree on that.
Yeah, I mean, this is a couple of steps away from Pascal's wager when you get into this probability thing, in which you're inserting into it again on top of it a hiding God. There's a lot of conditionals in order to get to this point, I think.
But they're ones that you guys would all agree on.
Well, they're ones that we were granting for the sake of conversation.
What would you?
Well, I mean, obviously, I'm not assigning probabilities in the same way.
Well, you're not. But I'm curious, like, if it's not for the sake of argument, like, what would you actually disagree with that we've said so far?
Well, okay, like, so the things that I mean, if we wanted to pull polytheism out against this, then a God that hides, I think, winds up just on the fringe of barely worth talking about, to the point where I don't know if I would even include it into the conversation. And atheism, to me, is it makes up a percentage in my thoughts that is, I don't know what number I would assign to it. Intuitively, I'm thinking like 10 or 20, but it's
You're getting into like Bayes' theorem at this point.
yeah, I don't fashion my beliefs on the basis of probability, and the confidence that I hold in my position isn't based on probabilities. So a probability argument like this, wouldn't subdivide positions that I have like this. You would wind up taking something that's already really small and dividing it in two. And I don't think that it's a useful. It's not useful in the kind of conversations that I like having. Where I think it does work is when you're dealing with an atheist that is being aggressive on certain topics that lead you into this conversation. That's where I think this conversation gets useful, and that's the reason why I was
in James' favor.
I've seen atheists do that crap.
If I can throw a point in James' favor, and piggyback off what Ocean said, it does seem like this is one of those things that if you've got an atheist that says that it's irrational to believe in a God,
right?
If you have that flavor of atheist, this is an argument that literally goes, well, probabilistically, it is more rational and you can even give Christianity and you can give all theisms a 0.0001%, and it still ends up being that they're that percentage higher once you've done the subdivide. So you can put any numbers there, and the argument works, and I guess that is a strength of it. So the argument is more that is it rational to believe in a deity? For me, before even walking into this conversation, I already deemed it rational.
Well, I mean, hold on. Okay, we agree on that. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
Yeah, that's fine.
I want you to finish your point. I'm really sorry.
No, he finished his point.
Yeah, that was actually the end of my point. My
so,
point was that this works very well to show an atheist who thinks that God belief is irrational, period, just apropos. It shows them that, no, that's not necessarily the case. But if you've got an atheist like me that already thinks that God belief is rational, then it might not do the same things that you're wanting it to.
Clip it. He thinks theism's rational.
So
this is like the 15th time I've said that.
I know. And I've even had this conversation with you before live. But anyway, go ahead, James.
Given that you guys are old debater chaps, you guys have been in the debates for a long time, or you like being challenged, I assume, the same way I do. Like, you wouldn't mind then. I'll basically say in the most friendly way, and like I'm not trying to be like a disagreeable. Mm-hmm. That you said like, well, we've granted these things for the sake of argument. I'm asserting that like all of these things that you granted for the sake of argument, you don't have any rational reason to not grant or to even withhold agreement from. In other words, I think you guys should actually agree with all the things I've said so far. And if not, like, well, give me a hold on one second. Just give me a genuine objection, and then let me address that. Because why would you throw out these hypothetical ones that you don't even believe in and that are weaker than the ones you actually have, right?
Well, what I wanted to do was agree with you to the point where we're setting up the argument. The things that we granted for the sake of argument were the percentage points, and then I think that where we're not granting for the sake of argument is the effect of you actually making the argument. I think that what you're talking about with respect to probability seems sound to me. I'm not disagreeing with you on that, which is the thrust of like what you're actually arguing. The things that when it comes to, does this make me think that theism is more likely than atheism? Well, no, it doesn't work on me necessarily, because I'm starting with completely different numbers than our hypothetical person is. That's where I'm granting for the sake of argument. Rather, is that we were trying to make a thing where there's a hypothetical person that believes theism to be a 3% chance. That's the reason why I've been agreeing with you throughout the course of this conversation, because I think what you're saying works.
I'm saying for an atheist,
but I'm not. Like that would be where, Cyrus, do you think that there being a god is now more likely than there not being a god, given this argument being presented to you?
Well, no, hold on one second.
But for me, like I'm not like I said earlier, is that for me what this does is it subdivides a percentage point that is already fairly small on my part.
Okay.
I'm not an atheist. So
okay. Well, but I can ask you if you'd be willing to. I mean, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
I think that atheism is rational. I think theism is rational.
Well, I want to ask this though, not for you personally, but do you think that if an atheist brings up the objection of the hidden God to my argument, that if they were to be consistent, because I agree, like most atheists will hear what I said tonight, they can't give a response. They'll be like, okay, or they'll give a response and I'll show how it doesn't work. And then, but they'll still say, well, I'm not going to be, I still don't think theism is more reasonable than atheism. And obviously not for any rational reason, because I've already, I would show that, like I'm saying, I think I could show why there aren't any rational reasons to still resist that. If they were to be consistent, though, they would say that.
So two things to respond to that. One, I agree with you. If there's an atheist that brings up that kind of objection to you, you can spring the trap on them and it should work. It'll put them in a position in which they're squirming. They're not able to put up an objection properly, and they're obviously holding a position that isn't rational. That if they're trying to say, well, it's still less likely given this objection. The other part of it is that you could then use this argument to say, see, you're holding a position on the basis of intuition. You're not holding a position on the basis of rationality. You're holding it on the basis of intuition. You think that atheism, there being no God, is still more likely simply because you intuit it to be so, rather than on the basis of rationality. Does that make sense?
Agree. We're in the same boat. Cyrus, would you agree?
Works fine with me.
Whoa. Okay. You guys are blowing me away.
Well, this is the reason why, and I have several videos on my channel where I've said as much as why I've said that if somebody says that belief in a God is irrational, there are theists who have irrationally held beliefs. There are also atheists that irrationally hold their beliefs and positions as well. So somebody say that simply theism is irrational. Well, why is theism irrational? Usually there's not a good reason given.
Well, but I was asking, like, would you agree with that? If an atheist brings up and I appreciate you conceding those points though, but if an atheist says, well, what about this hidden God? I mean, we might ascribe a probability to him. Like, would you agree, like the chain of reasoning I've given so far, not for the sake of argument, but would you actually genuinely agree with me with what I basically said so far to say, like, hey, okay, but you have to bite the bullet. The cost is, if you were to be consistent, it leads you to say that theism is more likely than atheism. Like, would you agree with me on that? Or if not, why? What reasons would you give for not agreeing with me?
Say that if somebody wants to say that it's irrational to be a theist, and they hear your argument, they can't really be consistent in responding. Rephrase the question one more time. I looked at the chat for a second and it blanked part of it out.
Oh, okay, that's all right. So I'm saying that I gave the original argument, and if they wanted to use the hidden God idea, they don't have to, but if they wanted to use it, I'm saying that I've given responses such that if they were to be consistent, like I've shown that if they were to be consistent, they would if they're going to use that as their objection, they should say that theism is actually more likely, like 51%, more likely compared to 49% for atheism. And if you don't agree with me, that like what reasons would you give?
So I'm going to say this it's going to sound strange. As somebody who plays a lot of competitive card games, I'm perfectly fine saying that theism is more likely. Okay, and so it sounds like, well, no, I'm asking about my chain of reasoning. If there's something you disagreed with it, what would it be? Or would you say, like, I'm
no,
fine,
James,
I'm fine accepting the entire chain of reasoning and saying that there's a 50 plus whatever percentage chance for theism, whatever percentage you want to assign. I'm perfectly fine saying that is the more reasonable of the two by whatever percentage.
Given the chain of reasoning that we've given that somebody would bring up the hidden God idea, right?
Yes.
Oh,
right.
Well, we agree. Okay. Sorry. Forgive me. I'm not trying to be a jerk and rub it in. It's just that I wasn't sure if you did.
You said that what I said checks out, right, Cyrus?
Yeah, pretty much. The whole reason that I'm okay accepting that, though, is there's two reasons. One, as somebody who does play a lot of competitive card games and brings in what's called a rogue deck. I don't know if you ever played any card games before, James.
Like a little bit. I don't know a lot about it.
I've never played any card game ever.
Don't lie, Ocean.
I've played card games with Cyrus.
So, As an example, one of the things that you do in card games is you do a series of playtests. When you playtest a deck, you have to playtest 100 times because if you don't have enough ratios to work with, which sucks because extra amount of time is used in order to do so. It has been the case that decks that have a low probability chance of winning, like decks that have a 24% win ratio, can go into a tournament and win. It's rare, but it has been the case historically that it has happened. It's happened a number of times. I'm okay biting the bullet saying that one is more likely, because it might still end up being the case later on down the road that the more likely of the two outcomes is not the case. So I don't have an issue biting the bullet on theism being more likely. Doesn't bother me in any way, shape, or form.
Right, but that seems to be independent of the argument that I've given. Like it's so another like okay, I you agree with me, thank you. And I'm sorry.
I mean, if we want to get into probabilities and ratios as per competitive card games, that's a really long rabbit hole, and we don't have time for that. But I'm willing to do that.
I defer to you on that. I don't know anything about it, but and like I said, I'm not trying to be like a jerk. It's just that I'm like, it is true that this is one argument that I'm willing to jump in, like, and the reason is like, to be honest, like, because Pelagia was like, hey, do you want to debate the resurrection? I was like, frankly, I would lose if I debated you, Pelagia, because I haven't read enough recently. Pelagia has read a lot, and he's read primary sources. Pelagia is actually a very impressive debater for that being one of many reasons. But
he surprised me how good he was.
Yeah, like, and so, but the reason though that with this wager, I'm willing to go like on any channel and be like, sure, let's talk about it, and I'll even like try to debate and press people on it. Is like I've just like read a ton about it. So I kind of did my master's thesis on it, and at Texas Tech, so like secular university, not like a, not to say that apologetics schools can't produce good theses or but anyway. I really believe in it, and so that's why I'm kind of like, okay, like I run into people who are skeptical, and I know that you guys are actually very deferential in terms of like we were kind of like, oh, okay, like we're on the same page, but like I run into skeptics, and I'm like, okay, well, if you're going to be so skeptical, like okay, then let's talk about it, and sometimes it just drives me nuts because it's like, why are you?
That brings up something.
Go ahead.
Are you familiar? I think it's called Epicurus's ass. Are you familiar with it?
It sounds familiar.
So Epicurus's ass, and I think it was Epicurus's. I'm 90% certain it was. If somebody in the live chat can let me know if it's not the case. But I had this discussion with a PhD who studies ancient culture. So like the Epicureans were I believe he did one of his theses on the Epicureans, which are separate from Epicurus completely. But Epicurus's ass is considered the perfect skeptic. Epicurus's ass is equidistant between, and ass being donkey, of course. It's just classically called the ass.
Oh, I thought you were talking about his butt.
No, I'm not talking about the butt. But so the ass finds itself 50 feet away from grain. This is high quality grain. It'll give perfect nutrients to what it needs. The ass also finds itself 50 feet away from the exact same kind of grain, or at least the exact same quality. It could be different grain. Basically, the nutrition value of both of these are the same, as far as the ass can tell.
And they both taste great.
And the end result is the ass starves. Because it's equidistant, and both are identical, it can't make a decision because it's stuck in a 50-50. It can't go between the two, so the ass starves. That would be essentially a hyper-skeptic here, is the ass that starves. There's two decisions to be made, and they can't make a decision between the two. That's right. That seems like the person that you're describing that would hold issue with this. That seems like that's what I would bring up to them. I'll just be like, hey, let's talk about this ass real quick.
Yeah, Burden's ass is like we're on the same page, and I just sometimes I like people bring like they're so, and you guys weren't this way, but sometimes they're so skeptical. You know, for example, don't get me wrong, I love non sequitur, and I love the people at non sequitur. Nothing against them.
Mm-hmm.
But you know, if I go on there,
That's Steve.
Steve's listening.
Steve's in his live chat.
Except Steve.
Except Steve McRae.
Actually, Steve's like one of my favorite people ever. But okay, so
Okay, now I see. All right, you play Kate. No, I'm just kidding.
and it's not just on sequitur show. They'll do it at Modern Day Debate too. If I debate, like I did, I think I debated like Tom Jump on this, and so like when I debated Ocean's twin brother Tom Jump.
Oh, that sounds like an insult.
I'm sorry. Okay, I know you guys don't get along. I like to tease you guys, but okay. So basically, some of the people in the comments are like, "Oh, so stupid! What a dumb argument!" And I'm like, "Okay, like, will you, like, can't you give it a chance?" Like,
the problem there is that you're asking the masses to not be laymen. You can't ask laymen to not be laymen. That's not how it works.
I gave up on the live chat agreeing with me on arguments some time ago. And since I've given up on the live chat agreeing with me on arguments, I've found that the live chat sometimes likes me. Which is weird. But so because I've been on, in some cases, live chat fucking hates me. And then there's other times where the live chat is excited about me. Anyway, but so don't worry about them. The argument either will stand on its merits or it won't. The person who you're debating, what I've found is that, like, usually if the person that you're debating knows a little bit about logic, they'll realize they're losing. And that's really the part that can be fun, is when it's like, oh, okay, no, I'm making him squirm and he realizes he's squirming. And that's all. That's where you've probably won.
Is it? I think it's only frustrating when you're dealing with somebody who's obstinate.
Right, and I've debated people where it's like, no, I'm definitely winning here, but they have no idea. That can be frustrating.
Yeah,
it was frustrating to me. That's what happened on Atheist Edge when we had I can't remember the pastor that was on, but I was explaining something.
Talking to pastors, I say this as a clergyman. It's frustrating.
But it was I didn't agree with the atheist and I didn't agree with the pastor, and I'm sitting here trying to explain why both of them are wrong. And I'm just like, Ocean, you watched that one.
I think I did, yeah.
Where I'm just like,
I watched a little bit of it, but
and I'm just like, I tell the pastor, like, you're wrong on this for these reasons, and then the atheist will say this. I'm like, no, you're wrong too. Stop it.
This is one of the reasons why I love Cyrus, is that he does shit like that. He's like the least tribalistic atheist. It's fun.
I think you're right. I should probably have more acceptance and just say, like, well, can't please everybody.
Right.
No, you can't. I've received death threats in my comments before. You can't please everybody.
When the person, I rarely think, especially if I'm winning in a debate, I never expect the person that I'm debating to be excited that I'm winning. So the live chat, especially if the live chat has a bias towards the person I'm debating, the fact that they're not excited, you know, that is predictable. That if you're doing well, that that you're going to get some hate from the people that are siding with the person that you're going against. At the same time, though, if you're really screwing up, you'll get the same thing. So it's kind of similar with the God that hides. Are you winning? Maybe we have to split that probability down the middle.
I will say, though, I've enjoyed this conversation. I know that there have been several times where James has been like, I'm sorry if I'm too aggressive, and I'm just like,
no,
you're fine.
I only regret when I sometimes like get excited and I like start to like jump in and interrupt. So that I don't want to do. I appreciate your patience because I did that a little bit, and I'm sorry about that.
You're fine.
It's just that it's more that like it's not like I'm like, oh, like if I was there I would punch you. It's not that at all. It's that I get excited because I'm like, oh, we're on the verge of this like idea, or that, you know, like.
Yeah, this is basically you. Is you're just like. Is that guy?
That's true.
I poked around your channel. This segues pretty well. I poked around your channel at one point early on, and it seems like in like the earlier videos, there's a couple of debates where you're on stage.
Oh yeah.
Is that right? So debated competitively before in like auditoriums and stuff like that. Is that the case?
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. It was a long time ago, and one of the reasons I like moderating now, though, instead is it's not super likely that I would get in trouble. I think so. For example, like Pascal's wager, I think is pretty. It's like pretty safe.
Yeah.
But some topics, I don't know if I'd want to debate, and like if my like advisor found out, if my people from the university found out, I don't know if it'd be like, I don't know how they take it. So if I'm a moderator,
it's the safer thing to do, but still being able to be in the debate sphere.
Are you talking about things like social issues, or are you talking about like
especially social issues? I won't even. I'm kind of not even sure if I want to have them on the channel,
right?
Because I'm just kind of like, even though I'm moderating, I just don't know. But yeah, so you get exactly where I'm coming from. Is moderating. Sure. I love meeting new people. I love people in general. Like I'm really extroverted. Like I'm not usually. So when you see me, if I'm like lit up, smiling, I'm not like that when I'm alone. I'm really extroverted. So you're getting kind of like a selected piece of how you're getting a selected like picture.
You're
of
enjoying people.
Yeah.
When in the moments, when
I'm alone, I'm alone and desperate.
Remember how I said before we went on the stream that smile hides a darkness? I meant that in jest. I wasn't aware it was going to come out.
Pretty bad. So, but whatever. Yeah.
I will say that I can empathize with that because the reason that I had my character as an avatar to begin with is because I live in the Deep South and I'm an atheist. So like me having my channel became one of those issues that like if an employer found out and they happen to be hyper religious, it just so happens that many of mine have been, that there's a risk. There's a risk factor involved in me just simply being in this sphere. And then all it takes is me, like I had the pro-life, pro-choice debate on Non Sequitur show. All it takes is my employer disagreeing with my stance on something like that very heavily for me to get called into the office and go, we need to have a talk. Because Georgia's an at-will state. So it's all they have to do is find any excuse to fire. And it doesn't have to even be linked to why they're actually firing you. It's happened several times, not to me personally, but to people that I know. So I can empathize with your dilemma because you're in a scenario. Right to work
means right to fire.
Yeah, right to work just means right to fire. That's all it means. So I can understand. It's one of the reasons why, like, now I'm okay doing a lot of these debates and a lot of these conversations because my channel is my job. So if somebody doesn't agree with one of my points, I'm like, well, that's fine. That's the whole reason I have my channel. You do you, and I'll do me. It's not like an employer's going to fire me for it.
Yeah. Yeah. So, but yeah, I really enjoyed this as well. That's encouraging you did, and that you guys are comfortable with that kind of like heat and, like the pressing, like.
I don't think there was a point where any of us got like super frustrated. We just like, I'm just kind of like, ooh, it's getting fun.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh,
I got excited about the topic. So, and like, I come from in these conversations, I'm coming from a debate background, and Suris is as well. And I'm I've definitely been in far more contentious conversations. So, there's a couple of, just ask Steve. I've yelled at people on his channel before. You want there's been
I've yelled at people on his channel as well.
What was it? Catholic Fusionist or
no? Me and Catholic Fusionists get along perfectly fine.
What was that?
It was Pragmatic Culture. Pragmatic
Culture. It was about priests, right?
It was about priests and about I think the particular conversation we had was on morality, and it went in a direction. It went in a similar direction to the one that Brojo went into. The one with Brojo went dark as well. That was interesting.
But, I mean, it's like, I think that Steve is like, Ocean's freaking yelled at me. I have.
Steve saying that Pragmatic Culture was dying on a hill during that conversation.
Footage exists of me yelling at Steve.
I've been in conversations where you've yelled at people. Multiple of them. Those people
So-
generally were my friends.
I'm gonna get a reputation. So, anywho, I really enjoyed having James on. Go check out his channel.
I just want, this was
Modern
worth
Day
having
Debate.
a 2-hour episode. Normally we
Yeah.
only go for like an hour and a half, but this one,
Right, we still got 48 viewers, and this is like, thanks you guys for watching. This is it's really cool having this little podcast. So, but definitely check out James's channel. Link is below, and happy Thursday from me.
Thanks, guys.
same here. And then I would like to say that we do have a little bit of time. I don't want to do Q&A right now because we've already been here 2 hours.
Oh yeah, let's pull some questions from the chat.
Oh God, no, we will be here forever.
Any of you have any questions for
Ocean. I can mute you. I would say though, James, if you have any closing things that you'd like to say, go ahead. You are the guest here, so by all means.
Well, I'm just like, thank you guys for having me on. Thank you for being so cordial and so friendly and so patient with me. And also, it was just an honor to be here. So it means a lot to get to hang out with you guys. And I just, it's the one thing, like one of the very few things that I get to do where you get in these conversations and it's like time disappears and it's just fun. So thank you guys for that good time.
Yep.
Thank you.
Definitely enjoyed having you on. It was you're one of the guests that we've been trying to get on for a little bit. There's a whole reason this started at 11:15, guys, or 11:40. Sorry, no.
We really wanted James on the show this week. So.
Yeah, we had to bend over to make it happen, but I'm glad we did. This was a good conversation, and it's one of the more pointed conversations we've been able to have on this podcast. And while I don't think it should happen all the time, I do think that it should happen sometimes, and I really enjoy it when it does.
Sweet.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for coming on, James, and we will go ahead and we're going to be hopping offline. If you guys enjoyed it, go ahead and give it a like. If you haven't given it a like, it's not Thursday anymore, Ocean.
It's right. It's Tuesday.
It's not. If you guys haven't given it a like already, then I don't want to say you're bad people because you're not.
Hit that like, friends. I highly encourage you to hit the like. It's sorry, didn't mean to interrupt.
And apparently, Steve McRae says that he'll end up having dream sex with me. That's the note we're ending on.
In the chat. I'm